So a very warm welcome to all participants. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are right now. And we are pleased to welcome you at today's event. It's a joint event between the Inter-Resilience Secretariat and the Anticipation Hub, as well as IFRC, towards proactive disaster risk management. Benefits and challenges in linking early warning with risk financing. I'm Daniel Stadtmüller, Senior Policy Advisor at the Inter-Resilience Secretariat, and I'm joined today for the moderation by Kara Siahan, who is Early Action and Disaster Risk Financing Coordinator at IFRC.
Ja, ein Handtuch vielleicht.
I would ask all of you in terms of housekeeping to keep your microphones muted while you're not speaking, and we will use for the Q&A in the plenary, we will use the chat function. So I would kindly ask you to place your questions through the chat function, and in case you are experiencing any technical problems, we will do our best to support you. Please also be aware that all sessions at Understanding Risk will be recorded. So before I hand over to Kara to guide us through the first part of the session, for those of you who are not aware what the Inter-Resilience Global Partnership is, we are a global multi-stakeholder platform with the objective to protect the lives and livelihoods of poor and vulnerable people from disasters. And one of our explicit targets is to protect 500 million people by 2025. Across vulnerable countries. Our specific focus is prearranged financing and making sure that both governments as well as people have the funding they need for early action, relief and recovery after climate shocks and disasters. Our approach has always been not to look at this at risk financing in a silo, but rather to look at it integrated with other elements of resilience and embedded into a wider risk management framework. And so within that, we also want to focus and explore what are co-benefits, what are synergies with other elements of resilience along a comprehensive risk management framework. And one of the focuses has been to look at early warning systems and how risk financing can be linked to early warning systems to move the payouts and the disbursements, the funding that is provided from an ex post to an ex ante stage, and to enable people and governments to act before disasters occur. And this is why we are pleased to have this session today with all of you, and to look at some active and interesting case studies on the ground, but also to look at the challenges that lie ahead in scaling up and further promoting these solutions. And now, with no further ado, I'd like to hand over to Kara to guide us through the first part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much for the eloquent intro. So everyone, I'm Kara Siahan. I work, as Daniel mentioned, at IFRC as the coordinator for early action and disaster risk financing, but also here with my second hat for the Anticipation Hub as the lead for emerging themes, policy and network. So I think for us, it's very important for us to be here supporting this event. As Daniel said, it's about having a comprehensive disaster risk management. And for us, of course, the focus is on assuring that early warning leads to early action, especially with and from and by the last mile, because we are working with communities directly through our national societies all over the world. So again, building on years of experience in early warning systems, community early warning systems, preparedness, and disaster risk reduction, we have been developing the approach of forecast-based financing, also more called anticipatory action, the last few years, together with our partners. So Anticipation Hub, for example, is an effort or a partnership of the German Red Cross, IFRC, and the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. So after a few years and now reaching 31 countries developing and implementing the approach, we basically want to take up that, let's say, scale that up through exchanging, through continuing improving the methodology. So the Anticipation Hub is an online exchange platform to do or promote just that, those efforts. So again, it's about learning, it's about building on practices, it's about collecting evidence, and also informing policy and advocacy. And also in terms of emerging topics, we'd like to again bring in, the unusual suspects, we like to call it, people who are not normally in the part of the humanitarian community. So forecast-based financing, anticipatory action is of course a mix of using science, planning, and finance to act ahead of disasters. And again, this Anticipation Hub, although established by and managed by the Red Cross, it is for the wider humanitarian system. There's a lot of demand there now. And of course, we are not working as Red Cross alone. There's also the UN and the START network. Altogether, we are working in 60 countries developing this approach. So very excited to be here today. And on the agenda, so we have also crafted together with the Insur Resilience team, with Katarina, with Daniel, a nice agenda today that is a mix of input. So we will be talking about solutions in the first part. We will start, of course, with John Harding from the Cruise Initiative to help us with the framing to begin the day. And I will test your knowledge through a little quiz. And then our great speakers from START Network, Claire, will talk about Arc Replica in Senegal. We have Afroza from the German Red Cross Bangladesh, and Toby Berman from Global Parametrics. So they will pitch their case studies, and you can choose by joining one of the breakout rooms. And then we will discuss, and then we will report back. And we will also invite you to visit our cartoon gallery. And then Daniel will take over the moderation for the second part. We have a great panel discussion prepared with Toby, with Irene Amoron from the Climate Center, and also Eduardo from the Philippines Bureau of Treasury. So over to John Harding. So John Harding is the head of the Climate Risk Early Warning Systems Initiative Secretariat. He will be helping us with the framing. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Daniel. I hope you can all hear me well, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this session. I'd like to start by actually thanking the organizers of the session, not least for keeping this important topic on the agenda as we discuss. It's not the first session we've had on this topic. Hopefully not the last, because it's not an easy topic to address, and we need all the inputs and insights and practical examples we can get. And these sessions are excellent opportunities for us to exchange and advance our common understanding, on the subject. Hopefully we don't have to make a case to you on why we need to better link early warning with the risk financing. If you joined the session, you're probably pretty convinced on why we need to do it, but we'd like to understand on how can we better align these different topics. And Daniel said it very nicely in his introductory remarks. We're contributing to a comprehensive risk framework, and while let's say these different agendas, if you're talking about risk financing, insurance schemes, or early warning, they tend to still function a little bit through their own engagement in countries, their own mechanisms, their own ways of functioning. We're very keen, and we're all committed to see how we can better integrate these approaches, and it's probably reflected quite nicely in the fact that Insur Resilience was launched in 2015 at the same time as the initiative where I'm currently working, which is the CRUISE, the Climate Risk Early Warning System. And if you look at our objectives, they may seem quite distinct. On the one hand, Insur Resilience, they're looking to increase penetration of insurance in developing countries. And on cruise, on the other hand, we're trying to provide early warnings, you know, in those same countries. You know, an initial perception may be these are not interlinked. But if you look at the high level of our objective, of our respective objectives, we're actually very much aligned. You know, we're both trying to support countries to reduce the loss of life, economic loss. You know, building resilience is basically what are our higher level objectives, and that's the same for the governments, and that's why we've been very much, you know, looking to see how we can integrate our agendas. In order to understand how to do this better, I went to look for this old diagram reflecting on how governments manage their risk. So the diagram itself is nothing new, but I think it's useful for us to sort of navigate a little bit amongst these topics. For those of you familiar with this, on the x-axis, you have the types of risk and the tools that are put in place by governments to address them. And on the y-axis, you have simply the cost return of these different approaches. The lower the lower the level, the higher the cost return, the cheaper it is, and in a way the most effective it is, the approaches. So on the left of this diagram, you have all the risk that exists out there that governments can reduce or avoid. It may mean building in the right places, or if you haven't built in the right place, retrofitting your infrastructure. There's a lot of policies and approaches that are available to governments to actually reduce risk, and it's by far the most cost-effective approach. We all aspire to not have a disaster in the first place. So that's all those measures to reduce risk. Now, not all risk can be reduced. I mean, sometimes it's just too expensive. Retrofitting some buildings, it wouldn't make economic sense to do it. And so we accept there's going to be a certain level of risk, and that's where the insurance schemes come in. And so that's in the center of this figure. The governments look at how they can share some of this risk and share the financial burden of the risk. And on the right, well, there's always going to be disaster. If we manage to manage our risk effectively, we wouldn't have disasters. But we know there's always going to be this residual risk, and that's where we rely on for more developed countries, we rely on the humanitarian system. The different response mechanisms are available. Very important mechanisms. They're by far the less effective, but we rely on them very much in the case of when a disaster occurs. And our collective objective is to push as much as possible towards the left of this diagram. What I mean by that is that if for the humanitarian actors, on the right, it's the residual risk. The more anticipatory we can be, the more effective we're going to be. In the center of the graph for the insurance, we know that insurances can actually be drivers of risk. We know in Europe, the flood risk insurance in Europe, it actually meant that people built in the wrong places because they felt secured by an insurance. So that is well understood. So we're always looking to put in place those incentives through our insurance schemes to push towards prevention. And of course, that's our drive through these processes, and early warning systems can contribute to those processes. Now, so how do we achieve this? And if I can have my next slide, Katerina. One aspect, and we're going to hear a lot about this today, I'm certain, is around data and risk information. That is one of the primary drivers which allow us to shift towards the left in that diagram I was shown earlier. We work currently in a number of countries to help develop certain data through the National Meteorological Hydrological Services, but for risk information there are other institutions involved. The way currently the data we are producing is not always, let's say, adapted, appropriate for the needs of the insurance companies or other risk sharing schemes out there. And that's despite the fact that we recognize that this data is extremely important. I mean, that we know, if you're pricing the risk, we need that information. If you're going to set up a scheme with parametric payouts, you need, if it's for rainfall, obviously, wind speed, you're going to need not only that data, but you're going to need it in a way that's sufficiently reliable for you to bring into your schemes. So in a way, one of the biggest obstacles we are seeing in aligning better our agendas is the fact that the data is not made available in the right format or in the right timing, and to actually allow the penetration of insurance schemes. But I would add here, it's not only a data issue. We're seeing institutional limitations. The members we work with, which are National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, don't always identify the insurance sector as one of their priority areas for service provision, basically, to use their language. They provide services and they don't always see the priority. So it really also is a case to be made of making a case for risk financing and stronger institutional alignment. And if I could have my last slide, Katrina, obviously once we look at the context, we're also very interested in looking at the practical steps. How can we move forward? How can we enhance our alignment between these agendas? And I'm just going to mention here some of the ways where we see practical ways forward. But this session, the way it's structured, you will be hearing much more tangible examples, and it's going to be interactive. So we're also going to be looking for input from you. This is something we're really trying to learn iteratively as we're going forward, how to do this. So just to mention some of the ways that we are seeing where this is starting to happen and we think needs to be replicated and scaled up. First, when we're looking at insurance schemes, risk financing schemes, they need to bring in these incentives within their modus operandi to promote building resilience. And that can be done in particular through strengthening the capacity of the countries to preparedness and early warning. If you look at the ARC, which is one of our flagship initiatives out there, it encourages their members to put in place contingency plans, which include stronger capacity for preparedness and early warning systems. So we see that as the kind of practice that we'd like to see replicated. We're still unfortunately not programmatically aligned, so we know the countries, when they're setting these contingency plans, they're not tapping into the expertise of for example, our partners who are working on early warning systems. But that will come. But you see, we already need those incentives in place. Second, as I just mentioned just now, we need to get our members to better understand the needs. What are the basic data requirements for insurance penetration, and what is the type of data that's required, so we can align the services of our members, but also the regional and global centers that support those members to better align with the needs of the insurance sector. Third, a lot of when you look at the analysis of this data, the products that come out of this data, the risk analysis, they're very much, they can service both the needs of the insurance sector as they can service the needs of the early warning sector. For example, in Southeast Asia, this flood risk assessment platform is extremely useful also for the same countries to produce flood warnings. It's the same type of information we need to develop these, what we call impact-based forecasts. And so when it happens, too often we're developing these systems in parallel. But when we align them, it works extremely well. And fourthly, and this is very central to how our challenge, is that we need to find a way to sustainably develop these types of initiatives. The members we work with, which are in the lower income countries and small island states, they're challenging to get the public sector funding to provide this kind of data. And so we need to develop these partnerships in a way that ensure these longer term public sector support to the provision of the data. So there's different models that can be looked at here, but this is it's only through building those national institutions that we're really going to build effectively build the capacity that is required here. And for the moment, we too often rely on external consultancies and other types of schemes to bring in this data and this information. Because it's the easier way to do it, but we need to look at models which build up those national capacities. So those are some of the examples. As I said, we're very much looking forward to discussions moving forward on practical examples, but hearing also feedback from you on how to move this agenda forward. We're certainly going to be continue pushing to understand better how we can better align from our side. And we look forward to a continued dialogue at this session and beyond. Thank you, Kara and Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, John. And if you want to hear again from John, he will be at our other session this afternoon. Thank you, John. I think you really raised key highlights of what the challenges are and also how do we get there. So how we get to the solutions and the targets. And we hope that the presentations and the discussion today will address some of the issues there. But before we get there, I would like to assess the knowledge of this group participating here today by sharing with you a little 5-minute quiz. So if Katarina can include the link in the comment box, so you can see there's the link to the type form quiz. So it's a little bit of quiz on a few trivia and also one decision-making question. So we'll give you 4 minutes and then we'll come back and see the result. 4 minutes. Thank you. And those of you who just joined, we are doing a little quiz for the next 3 minutes. So you can see the link if you want to join the quiz. Everybody can do it individually. Okay, we're starting to see some results here. Curious to see what the group has. Interesting. We have 18 responses, maybe a little bit more, and we can. We have still, I think, 2 minutes more to gather the results or your input. Okay, one more minute, and then we close the quiz. Okay, quiz is going to end in 30 seconds. Really interesting answers, especially on question number 5. Okay, so I will share the results now. I will switch the view to my screen. There we go. Okay, great. So can you see it now?
Yep, we can see it, Cara.
Excellent. So first question, in the past 10 years, how much in percentage of all disasters triggered by natural hazards were caused by extreme weather and climate-related events such as floods, storms, and heat waves? So 56 of you answered correctly, is 83% correct. How many losses in US dollar do extreme weather events cause every year according to World Bank predictions? I think it's very close. Answer 100 billion and 200 billion. The correct one is actually 200 billion. Is actually the highest out of the options. Pacific tsunami warning system works by a recorder on the seabed relaying on anomalies to a buoy on the surface. How long does it take to transmit this data via satellite to ground station? So this is actually trying to demonstrate the improvement. The question, the speed, I mean, I think many of you wanted to be quicker. Most of you, 64% of you answered 5 seconds, but it's actually 15. How much of total assets lost in low and low middle income countries were insured from 2000 to 2015? You actually respond correctly, and this is actually a question from Insurance. So maybe most of the participants are coming from the insurance community. So thank you for the answers. And number 5, it's interesting because it's very diverse answers. Yes, some people say, yes, of course, if I live in an island, I need to evacuate. Yes, to reduce loss of life and livelihood. But that also depends on vulnerability. One person says, if on an island difficult to evacuate, depends on house structures. So this is, I think, a good segue because we will talk about some of these issues about looking at impact and making sure that planning and the financing actually address those and anticipate those. So thank you again for joining us in a little bit of a fun. And I want to now hand over to our presenters of today. We have our 3 brilliant colleagues. I will just introduce them so they can go back to back with their presentation. So first we will start with Claire Harris. Claire is a technical lead for disaster risk financing and crisis anticipation at the SPAC network. Welcome, Claire. Very happy to have you here today. She is a disaster risk specialist and operational disaster management professional with over 15 years of experience across the NGO, humanitarian, academia, and local government. She leads the technical aspect on risk financing programs and anticipation work. We have Toby, who is the partnership and innovation lead at Global Parametrics. Toby has 20 years of experience structuring and deploying financial solutions in emerging economies. And prior to joining Global Parametrics, he had a career in AIG before leaving to run his own microinsurance agency and administrator focus on reaching the uninsured. Toby is considered a leading expert in disaster risk finance, how it can be used to protect the most vulnerable against the economic effects of climate change, and how to make sure that no one is left behind. Afroza is now working with the German Red Cross as a senior project officer in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and she is supporting the implementation of our what I mentioned, the innovative approach of forecast-based financing with a countrywide impact-based forecast. So she will hopefully help us also with the question, what to do in the case of a cyclone. Different for climate-induced disasters in Bangladesh, such as flood, cyclone, and heat wave. So she's also acting as that cash focal point for German Red Cross, who is responsible to identify, design, and implement cash response initiatives in Bangladesh. So over to you, Claire, to our presenters. Thank you.
Thanks, Cara. So I think what we've been asked to do just now is just to give you guys a 2-minute kind of introductory outline of what our session is going to cover, to try to kind of entice you into our sessions. So essentially, the session that Start Network's going to run is looking at the ARC replica program in Senegal. Essentially, this was where a program was launched to purchase an insurance policy by the Start Network on behalf of all of its members, and triggered early action finance to avoid food insecurity from drought in Senegal. It was a structured partnership between civil society and the government, with a policy to cover a large percentage of the population at risk. It was early action, implementation at scale. And last year, 2019-2020, we actually had a trigger for a drought in Senegal. And there was a $10 million payout to Start Network, and a $10 million or $11 million payout to the government of Senegal, where the Start Network members and the government worked alongside each other to mitigate the impacts of the drought on people at risk. We also were implementing during COVID, so there's some elements around compound risk that we'll cover in the session, looking at the kind of significant impacts the project had in terms of mitigating losses, and also look at innovation around basis risk management, and use of flexible contingency plans with risk financing. I think Excellent. That was 2 minutes.
Thank you. Perfect. Very, very on point, Claire. Thank you. So again, what Claire mentioned, it's going to be a pitch, and you will then choose which presentation and discussion you will attend in the breakout group. So over to you, Toby.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining the session, and thanks for listening. Is there another slide after this from me? Yeah. So I'll be talking about the implementation of the Be Ready program. And the Be Ready program is one of the sort of a first of its kind anticipatory financial solution in humanitarian aid, whereby aid is sent directly to the most vulnerable prior to an event happening. And this aid gets sent directly via cash payments through mobile money. We partnered with Oxfam, Novib, Oxfam Philippines, Plan International Netherlands, and also Plan International Philippines to bring this program into action. It was initially piloted in Salcedo, Eastern Samar, and actually triggered on around Christmas Day 2019 with Typhoon Fanphone, but it's also been carrying on over the last year as well. It hasn't triggered, but we're sort of monitoring, having a sort of a forecast monitoring index of these cyclones, so these communities can know how to act. So I'll be talking about that, how we built the index, the data we used, how it all sort of fit together, and also about how we're planning to scale this program up, both in the Philippines and in different countries, but also potentially with different forecast indices, including flood as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. And over to our last pitch from Afroza, German Red Cross Bangladesh.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. So I'm talking about forecast-based financing in Bangladesh. Presently, we are mostly working on flood and cyclone, and in future, we are planning to work on heat wave too. So why we are talking about FBF now? Because FBF is something that is reshaping our disaster response now and is going to reshape it in future. FBF is one kind of an innovative technique that provides us the funding before any kind of extreme event that occurs, and release the financial resources and more efficiently, and ensure the more efficient use of our financial resources. So it creates opportunity for us to do some early actions and preparedness, which will allow us to reduce and minimize the disaster impact, reduce the loss of life and livelihood. FBF is all about knowing where to act and when to act. Slide next. Next slide, please. Yeah. So why we are talking about FBF? Because forecast-based financing, it's give us the forecasting and it provides us the decision-making model. It established the early action plans and arrange the pre-financing over there. So FBF is something which is faster, which is cheaper and more dignified. It reduces the loss and suffering before it occurs. So it protects the development gains and it increases the impact of available funds. So whenever the early warning is there, it activates the early actions and to reduce the humanitarian crisis. So if you want to be proactive, if you want to anticipate and act, this is the time to anticipate, start anticipating from now by joining our session on forecast-based financing. Thank you.
Thank you, Afroza, and thank you all three presenters for being on point the 2 minutes. So here's the case studies, the breakout group. So in the breakout groups, we want you to discuss with our presenters. Of course, it gives you an opportunity to clarify some of the concept that they presented. But what we want to hear is the type of solution. I mean, we talked about the type of solution offered, but what are the challenges and gaps that it addresses according to your respective works? The challenges and approaches to design triggers, data, and the scaling up of early warning systems, and then the type of funding and how sustainable it is. And then, of course, stakeholders involved in design and setup of tool. Who do we want to exchange and let's say, engage with as we improve and enhance the way that we develop these approaches? So each breakout group is to come with 2-3 major benefits and challenges of the solutions presented. And the session lead will have already in mind or prepared a rapporteur to come back to the whole group. So we will then start the breakout group and it will be about 10 minutes. Or maybe we might be a little bit less because we are a bit over, but yes, approximately. Actually, no, we are fine. Yeah. Okay, so 20 minutes. Sorry for that. 20 minutes. That's how much you have time for. Okay, great. So Katarina, will we be broken up into groups? Is it possible to select, or is it going to be random?
Actually, I'm still waiting for some guidance from our technician, please, on that question. We thought we were going to have to assign people randomly to the sessions, but if there's any other way to do it, to choose, then it would be great if we could just
okay, so
get this information. Otherwise, we would start the rooms and people will be pulled into or assigned into a room, and you could let us know if you would like to change.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I see the invitations popping from the breakout room. So see you in about 20 minutes or a little bit less. Thank you.
Kara, I think I have a few people here who have not been put into a breakout room. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Sarah has not seen the invitation.
Okay, strange. I might just try again, but I think someone in the Senegal team has just asked for help as well.
Okay. So I already received the invite for Bangladesh.
Are you able to go into the Bangladesh room, or?
I'm just waiting because I'm just gonna do later because I want to make sure that we don't have any issues with now.
With the breakout session.
Yeah, in case you need help. So.
I think there's something on Zoom that's not working, but I'm just trying to put people into breakout rooms, but it doesn't let me.
Okay.
Hello, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to check who is actually organizing the breakout rooms. Is it
So
Hannah?
this is Hannah, yeah, but I think because a lot of people joined late, they weren't put into breakout rooms because I created them earlier, and now I'm trying to put them into these rooms, but it won't let me. So I don't really know how to assign the people who have not been assigned yet to your breakout room.
Okay, if you pass host to myself, I can assign people. Does it matter who goes to which room?
No, not necessarily now. I'm just going to make you host. That would be great to just put them in.
Okay.
Okay, I shall start to assign people randomly to each room, no problem.
Okay.
There's one person, well, there's some request here.
Okay.
Geo Stephen Ramage wants to be in the forecast base in the Bangladesh.
Okay.
So Geo Stephen Ramage, and then Kate Hosking want to be global parametrics. Kate Hosking.
Kate.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Would like to be in which room, please?
Philippines.
Philippines, no problem. I've moved that.
And then Alina wants to be in the Philippines also. Alina Bill.
Okay, that's fine.
And then Januka wants to be Bangladesh.
Yep, no problem.
And then Anna Dizon, Senegal.
Okay, it might be easier if. Okay, no, that's fine. Sorry, we'll go through these separately then. The last name was, please?
Anna Dizon,
Yes.
Senegal.
Okay.
Stefan Hirsch, Philippines.
Okay.
Faith Mithu, Bangladesh.
Okay.
Camilo Fernandez,
Yep.
Sarah DeWitt, Bangladesh. Wendy Smith, Philippines.
Okay.
Greta Auke, Philippines.
Okay.
Carolina Hess, Philippines.
Yep.
And Hans Alejandria, Philippines.
Okay.
Okay, and myself in Bangladesh, please.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, I'm already there. Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. I'll assign the rest automatically. Thank you.
Sorry, I think I'm actually going to stay in the plenary.
Okay, so if anything,
yeah. So Cara, I think you can go into breakout room as well if you want. But I think there's a few people still who are not assigned.
Huh. Oh, I received the flag, but now Okay, we're slowly welcoming back everyone to the main meeting room from the breakout. So it was fast. I think it was quite short, especially for people who might be new to the topic. But we hope that we were able to, give a taste of what Arc Replica, Global Parametrics, and German Red Cross, FBF are working on. So yeah, should I start? I cannot see the screen yet. Okay, great. So we're going to invite, according to the previous order, basically to share the insights from the group based on this exercise that we gave the group. So again, the question is on 2 to 3 major benefits and challenges of the solutions, the 3 solutions presented this morning. So I'll start with Claire's group. Claire, who is going to be reporting back from your group?
So Andrea, I think he was going to provide some thoughts, and then I'll jump in with anything.
Okay, great.
Yes, hi everyone. So in our group, we discussed about the START network work under the Arc Replica program to cover people at risk from drought in Senegal. And so this work, I think it has showed very important benefits to complement the government actions. So the government was able to cover already a percentage of population at risk, but there was a percentage of population that was not covered, and that's what the START network helped with this program. So there were 4 main activities that were financed. There was cash distribution to communities at risk, fortified flour distribution, and then raising awareness activities, and lastly also COVID-19 related hygiene and other support activities. So I think in terms of benefits, so there is a large benefit from these actions because it helped people at risk to cope with the incoming droughts, so to be more resilient to the climate shock. Just to conclude, and then I will let Claire complement. I think that in terms of the design and implementation of the early warning system, it was a huge challenging work, because they implemented this new system where they used they have driven a model with satellite rainfall data, and then calculated a water satisfactory index to measure like the hazard, the drought risk, and then also they complemented this with a government developed vulnerability model, where of course there is always a lot of in both components there is a lot of uncertainty and basis risk that they tried also to overcome, to monitor using some comparative monitor tools. So for example, they compared with the government precipitation reports, with other precipitation data sets, and also with reports from local villages who were reporting the conditions during the event. And that's all for me, but I guess Claire, you can
Great. Claire, if you have some short additional complementary comments, we hand over 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, the biggest benefits of the system was the really great working relationship that the START network members were able to forge with the government. There was a lot of trust built But I think on the challenges side, equally, that took a lot of time. It took years of us working together without there being a trigger for us to have built that trust and that relationship. So I think in any of these kind of risk sharing arrangements, that time has to be put in. So that's sometimes a challenge. And also, I think the added benefit civil society brought into the government's thinking around participation of communities, as well as factoring in some of that to the data around, say, the crops that were monitored, as well as like managing basis risk more proactively. So bringing that more innovative approach to the risk financing system, which covered the anticipation window, I think was probably some of the biggest benefits, but also brought challenges in relationship management, I'd say.
Thank you, Claire and Andrea. Toby's group, 3 minutes, please.
So we got pulled out before we got to choose So we got pulled out before we got to choose a host. So I might have to do it myself, unfortunately, if that's all right.
That's okay, of course, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So I think I'll say it from what we were discussing is I think the challenges, one of the key challenges is to get sort of regional buy-in. So unless you get the sort of the regional government to be actually fully involved, and that basically means sort of in a way paying for this program, because it is a quasi, the plan would be to be a quasi sort of risk transfer program. It's difficult to make something that's sustainable, because there are sort of costs attached to it. So the challenge is that how do you turn a sort of donor funded program into a sustainable privately funded program? And the only way to do that is to get the local buy-in of the local government. The other challenge is then how to scale that so that you can actually get sort of risk pools of money in many different places, rather than being inefficient and having it all focused on one place. So those are sort of the challenges of the program. The benefits are you are actually getting targeted aid to communities prior to a disaster, so they can use that money as they see fit and as they need it. One of the key things is the disasters affect different people differently, so the aid can often be indiscriminate. So you are actually not discriminating, you're making sure that it's much more targeted. You're getting money to people quickly and to enable them to sort of restart their economic activities, and you're in a way creating protecting people for that point of a disaster, when often they have a sort of a big economic loss, but it's prior to any insurance payment coming in or prior to any aid coming in, you can get over that hurdle.
Brilliant. Thank you, Toby, for sticking to the 3 minutes. Now, Irene and Afroza, you're the last report back from the forecast-based financing presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, Kara. I will just give a few highlights, and then Afroza will conclude. So as the previous speaker, we did also have an opportunity to get a moderate somewhat feedback. But anyhow, it was good to see some feedback from participants in terms of clarifying what for example, what the danger levels were and how they were applicable in Bangladesh. And then we also had some questions in terms of understanding what are the considerations of the socioeconomic vulnerabilities that have been undertaken while we are developing the forecast-based financing system, and then also the community engagement in regards to developing EAPs. So it was good to know that communities are engaged from the very start in terms of designing and developing this system. So the collaboration with communities was, I think, for me, in my view, one of the successes and the benefits of this approach, and of course the available funding that is there with the no regrets condition. So that was for me one of the things that stood out. I'll hand over to Afroza.
Thank you, Irene. I think you have covered almost the most of the things that we discussed. So it was really interesting that people had the interest to know about the threshold level and how we do selected the threshold level and other things. So it was quite interactive. Though we couldn't finish it properly, we had to pull out from the session. But yeah, it was a nice session with all those questions, hearing from the people with lots of interest to know more detail about forecast-based financing and the technical part behind it, and the socioeconomic part, and also the involvement of community and how do we involve and what the level of involvement. So it was quite nice hearing from all those, and thank you.
Thank you, Afroza, and thank you also to the other groups. I think it's quite evident that despite of the different approaches, despite of kind of the different also methodology and team attached to private sector or the Red Cross or the NGOs, that we do share some kind of a common, let's say, challenges around making sure that we are engaging, whether it's communities and governments, the importance of actually having the relationship and having the trust, as Claire also mentioned, and also the technical challenges. But I think that it's clear the need for collaborating, the need for sharing of data is all over kind of the presentations and the discussion. So again, if we cannot have the time to discuss everything today, we hope that you continue the engagement with the Anticipation Hub and InsurResilience. InsurResilience, we'll talk about our event later at the end of the session. But now I want to invite you to visit our gallery. So Katarina already put on the comment box the link to our nice cartoon gallery that you can visit for about 5 minutes. Or even maybe a little bit less, 4 minutes. So if you can click on that, and it's best viewed normally with Google Chrome. So yeah, please come to our gallery. So that's the presentation there mentioning how to get there. So it's ce.goodfocus.net. And then the code is UR2020, and then we ask you to put your name and your email. Again, this is not to be stored, but just to have a unique access identity. So thank you. For 3 minutes, you can see the gallery and you can provide your comments. So again, what resonates with you? What makes you think about what thoughts generate from you when you look at these pictures? So please put in the comment box, and you can just click once you're done. So it's going to be just a quick exercise for us to go from very, let's say, broader framing to technical solutions, to now decompressing and just sharing your thoughts around these cartoons.
So Kara, I believe some people are having issues accessing the gallery, including myself. I think the page gets sort of stays at the welcome welcome page. So is there anything we can do?
Let's see. Okay. So images. Okay, can you do it now? Refresh, please. Sorry for that.
Yeah, it works now.
Okay,
thank
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So next 3 minutes. Sorry for that. Okay, I think we will very soon, in a few seconds, invite you back. So we hope that you were able to enjoy and reflect on the cartoons. I will now stop the gallery view so that we can see the results of your comments. Okay, so I will show what we saw here. Daniel and I will review basically the comments. So I'll share my screen. There we go. Can everyone see?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Finally, the technology is working here. So just to say that these are actually cartoons that were commissioned both by the Instant Resilience and the Anticipation Hub. So the first, as you can see, there's a guy coming to the doctor, and he's there, and the doctor say, oh, the coverage doesn't seem to include your illness. So the comments we see is a shock worry. Always read the small print, because that's what insurances are very good at, providing the small print. And can relate. Currently, funds seem to be easily available for COVID, but not other hazards. I feel you. Whoever wrote that, it's only about money. Yeah, again, like how can we make sure that the finances that we purchase or we develop as practitioners would meet the needs very well. And then the second cartoon is, sometimes I think the collaborative process will work better with you. This is actually one of my favorite one. The comments was here about not having sympathy. And the second comments I share with a lot, the tensions and politics that have emerged between humanitarian and development actors in the anticipation world, complicated tensions between yeah, I think that goes to show that we are here intensely, you know, from the development sector, from the humanitarian sector, trying to build those bridges and actually recognizing that in order to reach more, we need to work together. And there's just so much that we could exchange on and benefit from these kind of exchanges. And Daniel, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So maybe moving into the next rule 1, never work without a net, but rule 2, and perhaps more important, specify the type of net. The comments here, perception is what really matters. Makes me think about cash. Cash can be great, but is only as good as what people have the opportunity to use it for, to protect themselves. So very also related to informed decisions and decision making, and to make sure that both parties understand each other when talking about solutions. Communications, of course, is essential, easy to understand support. Then maybe moving into the next, preparedness beats fear. That's probably true. The more prepared you are, the less worried you might be about everything that might happen. So this is indeed a nice reality check. Better to think about this and choose deliberately where, in which situation you want to find yourself. I think it also relates to governments and the challenges they're currently facing. Happens too often, logic is what it takes to situate ourselves in between the most two ends. Very true. Pragmatism and balance, what is appropriate to do when a disaster management strategy, within a disaster management strategy, DRR, anticipation and response recovery. So very fitting, this image, to that. And then moving on into the funding for a fire extinguisher, and then let's ensure she comes to get it, learns how to use it, and trusts us that it will work. Yes, very true. New technologies, new solutions, especially also insurance, need to address the community knowledge level, or the community knowledge level needs to be improved, and needs capacity building, so people understand how to use the tools that they receive. Same for lack of collaboration between the stakeholders, speaks a lot about that. Help often arriving too late or too little. Log frames and inadequate theories of change. I like that. So many times we develop these things in detail on paper, but then the actual impact is not always clear. Have you tested the fire extinguisher before you ask others to trust it? Very important point. So piloting maybe first before scaling up. Having the resources is one thing, making sure that communities ready to use it is another thing. So moving on into the final one today, this is a bouncer in front of a club, and Santa Claus, I guess, responding not on the list. I invented the list. And the comments here, the clubs exist even visible to the blind eyes in the most subtle way. Very nicely, very eloquently framed. It could happen in our work too. Some of the most vulnerable beneficiaries could face the same issue as shown in this picture. True, and this is something that we all need to work on. Co-creation and participatory approaches are necessary for early warning and in general for disastrous management. Dare you to question me, that's very true as well. So I think with that, a lot of very interesting contributions here, and a lot of food for thought to move now into the next part of today's session. And this brings us to the panel discussion, including an audience Q&A. I mentioned at the beginning that we also ask you here to use the chat function, if possible, to ask questions to our panelists. The purpose now is really to build on the challenges and opportunities identified and to see how these can be addressed, how to seize opportunities, how to overcome challenges, and how to scale up solutions that help people and governments in anticipatory action. I have three panelists today. One does not require any further introduction. This is Toby, who has already presented a case in the previous part. But I would like to introduce two new participants. Very pleased to have Irene Amuron. She's a technical advisor at the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center on forecast-based financing, and she supports the Red Cross Red Crescent national societies in Africa to develop anticipatory mechanisms for weather and climate-related hazards. And I also have here today, very pleased to have Eduardo Marinho, Director of the Asset Management Services at the Philippines Bureau of the Treasury. And Eduardo advises the Treasurer of the Philippines in formulating and executing innovative disaster risk financing solutions. And I would like to start with you, Eduardo. We've seen some of the solutions that have been implemented, the START network, IFRC in Bangladesh, as well as one pilot, very insurance focused, let's say, in the Philippines, your country. And the question is a bit, when two different elements of resilience come together, such as preparedness, early warning systems, as well as risk financing insurance, how can we integrate these tools into, let's say, countrywide strategies for disaster risk management and countrywide national adaptation plans as well?
Okay, so just thank you for the introduction. So just a brief background. So of course, the Philippine government actually already has a disaster risk financing strategy. Personally, I was involved in a lot of the structuring and the placement of some of those disaster financing products. Now, the strategy for the country basically has three focuses. So, first one is, of course, a national level solutions. Second one is local government solutions, and the third one is household level solutions with the most vulnerable individual citizens of the country. So, at the Treasury, we have been very busy over the past few years in setting up those national level solutions. But one of the difficulties in actually expanding the disaster risk financing framework is for the local governments and, of course, the household level. So, because fundamentally, there's simply a lot of local governments that we need to work with, and they have a lot of different priorities. So the solution discussed by Toby, the Be Ready project in the Philippines, the pilot, it's actually a very innovative and an interesting way to address basically the two levels of risk financing strategy. So it addresses the local government solutions, and it also provides household level support, most vulnerable members of society, so through the direct cash transfer. So that's a very innovative and creative solution, and I'm very much I think that's the way forward in for the Philippine government. You really need to engage local governments in these types of structures, because they're on the forefront of dealing with national catastrophes. So they're the ones who have to actually evacuate the citizens. They're the ones who are part of the most vulnerable areas in the country. So they need to come up with the rehabilitation and the reconstruction plans for their own communities. So it's important to expand the risk financing framework, and the solution offered is one of a very important step towards that goal.
Thank you so much for this, and also for mentioning sort of the co-benefits perhaps that solutions need to look at, or especially, as you said, looking at the Be Ready program, how it addresses both the government level and the household level. And I guess you're very right to say that households are ultimately, people on the ground are ultimately affected, and how the contribution of solutions to their resilience needs to also be a part of a national strategy and a national approach to climate and resilience. Irene, maybe looking at you and your work with the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center, and I think we've heard a bit in some of the previous contributions about the importance of accurate forecasts and the importance of forecasts that can deliver the most impact in terms of mitigating human suffering and reducing risk to build resilience. How do you go about this in your daily work, and what are the challenges that you have encountered?
Thank you so much, Daniel. And yes, in terms of how do we transition to ensure that forecasts provide the most impactful solutions to be able to mitigate the risks and build resilience, in my view, based on experience and consultations and engagement with others, is that the future lies in impact-based forecasting for early actions. And this greatly calls for partnerships with communities, with academia, with the National Met Hydrological Services, for us to be able to understand the science. So with such very strong collaborations between the producers and the users of forecasts, it helps translate this complex science into information that can be usable and actionable to be able to ensure that we know when do we take these early actions, where are these early actions to be taken, who is most likely to be addressed. The beauty about the impact-based forecasting approaches is that it is developed on a basis of forecast and in-depth risk analysis. So combining exposure and vulnerabilities, enabling you to be able to know and anticipate, for example, the impacts and where it will happen, when it will happen. In regards to the challenges in this approach, of course, the main one being the capacities that are needed in country to be able to develop impact-based forecasting. Currently, most national meteorological organizations focus on forecasting what the impact, what the weather is, and yet we need to transition towards what the weather will do, looking at the impact for us to be able to take action on that. And so that capacity is still limited, especially in Africa. The second one, of course, is the data related to, in regards to understanding the risks, data related to exposure, data related to vulnerability. That is also one of the major challenges that we have. But I think the future is bright. There are already some progress and advances towards impact-based forecasting, and I would call on the participants here as well to take a look at our impact-based forecasting guide that was developed in collaboration with UKMet to be able to see how you can go about impact-based forecasting. Thank you, Daniel. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this very good overview of the challenges to make, I guess, forecast-based indexes more impactful, and yeah, both the lack of capacities, but also the lack of data being a major challenge in this regard. I think one of the elements that have been discussed also in my breakout room is the engagement of the private sector and the engagement of funding from the private sector to scale up solutions. I would maybe ask Toby, working for Global Parametrics, an organization that is close to the private sector and that has applied insurance mechanisms to humanitarian and development challenges, to really to maybe you can tell us what is it, how can we engage the private sector, and what are the contributions specifically that the private sector can make to move financing to an anticipatory stage?
Thank you. And just sort of very briefly, a lot of these discussions sort of build into the core of what global parametrics is and what we were set up to do. So we were set up with financing from the British government through FCDO and from the German government through KfW IIF to basically enable meso-level organizations. So these are organizations who have who operate on the ground and who have people who purchase services or use services from them on the ground to understand the impact of natural disaster and extreme weather. And this is this key idea of impact, because it's great knowing that something's happened, but what does that actually mean to an organization? And then by understanding your impact to the organization, then you can start passing that down to the beneficiaries from that organization. And the concept behind this was that once you have that information, you can start thinking about how to anticipate when something happens, how you can mitigate that impact, whether you mitigate it financially or whether you mitigate it through other resilience measures. But at least you have that information. So the information was key. So that was number one. But number two was that it's great to have this as a sort of doing consulting or helping people out, but you've actually got to produce solutions. The solutions will ultimately only ever come from the private sector if they're to be sustainable. So the second core tenet of global parametrics was that we would be an organization that would connect very closely with the private sector using private sector practices. And the main one in risk transfer is basically forms of insurance, where you basically have a price for something, and if something happens, you get paid. So in order to do that, we have to sort of set up our organization in two ways. One is to make sure that everything we did ultimately had a cost and ultimately had a pay. So there's a contract element in that, and that the things that we did, or the interventions that we did as well, were always going to be sustainable. So I think this key idea that what the private sector wants to know is that they want to know this is sustainable, that there's someone there who's going to pay for it in the end. They want to know that the actual transaction isn't going to lose them money, so that that the risk, the data, or the risk analysis, or what they call the underwriting is correct and true. And they also want to know that the public sector has some sort of skin in the game in a way that is involved. And that's sort of helped by the Natural Disaster Fund, which again is capital committed from BMZ and the UK government through FCDO, which is basically capital which underwrites some of these products, that enables private sector organizations to take part as well. So they get a feeling and understanding of the risks, and they test it out. And we have a partnership with Hannover Re from the private sector to do that. And that gives you the sort of the key pieces. So you have data that the private sector now understands and trusts. You have products that they know there's a market for, and they're willing to put their capital behind it. And those sort of three things together enables that really strong interaction with the private sector, which enables these donor-funded programs to eventually scale and become fully sustainable, so to speak.
Thank you, Toby. And indeed, quite true. There's also requirements coming from the private sector, not only requirements coming from vulnerable people in terms of impacts, and we heard from Irene what the challenges are there, but there's also the requirements from the private sector for solutions to be sustainable, exactly. Triggers to be validated, and also a reliability in who's going to pay for it. Premium financing, I guess, plays a major role in this end.
It does, and I think one of the key things is that people who are obviously who are being serviced by these solutions, the very poor and the very vulnerable, they don't have the economic ability to pay for these protections directly themselves. So there has to be a sort of a safety net almost built around them to provide those protections. And it can be done at a sovereign level through government, but ultimately that often can be it's very difficult on that level to pinpoint the really vulnerable. So as my colleague was saying, it makes sense to have it at lower levels as well, whether it's regional government or meso level through humanitarian organizations or through any organization, so that you make sure that you're protecting the most vulnerable without leaving them exposed to the costs of these programs.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. I'm looking at the chat now, and also Kara has stated that please feel free to ask questions. I don't see any questions here right now. While maybe one or two participants are still figuring out or thinking about what to ask to our panelists, maybe if I could, if I have from my end at least one final round of questions for each of you, looking at the Anticipation Hub and the Inter-Resilience Global Partnership, but also CRUISE, the Climate Risk Early Warning Systems Initiative. What would be your asks to each of these partnerships, or to the partnerships in general, in terms of what do you need from your perspective to scale up solutions, to make them more impactful, and to make them more sustainable? And I would start maybe with Eduardo, your perspective from a vulnerable country, coming from a vulnerable country, and from the Department of Finance.
Right. So as I think mentioned earlier, so we actually have done a lot of work at the national level, and that's also fully supported by other development partners such as the World Bank and the EDB. So in terms of capacity, in terms of understanding what the market is offering and the ability to tap them, I think there's been a lot of improvements, at least at the national level, in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities in the market. And of course, at the national level, we are relatively, we have the fiscal resources to actually engage the private sector, international capital markets on a for-profit basis, on a market basis. So of course, the technical assistance we need is really on the more technical parts of transaction structuring. For example, the cat bond that we recently issued, that one required a lot of World Bank support in terms of the infrastructure, the administrative expertise to actually put in a deal in the market. So that's more of our need at the national level. But if there is an ask for the other development partners, I think we really should try to engage the local governments more, because there's a lot of capacity building needs at that level that remains unmet. Resource needs are drastically, they don't have the fiscal resources to engage the financial markets similar to the national level. So they really need a lot more hand-holding. They really need a lot more education and technical expertise in trying to come up with the sustainable solutions for their own communities. Because again, the issue with the national government solutions is that it is actually very cumbersome to download the funds to the communities in need. And really, when you see a lot of poor communities, poor local government units desperately asking for aid, at least personally, it's just difficult, because there's a lot of bureaucracy separating the national government and the most vulnerable people. So really, you need to engage the local governments. The lower, the more important it is.
Thank you very much, and we'll definitely note that down. And I guess the level of intervention is crucial for the biggest impact. And yes, that brings me maybe to Irene. Final words. What would be your asks to the Anticipation Hub, to Inter-Resilience, and to CRUISE?
Thank you so much, Daniel. So my final ask to Inter-Resilience is strengthen and strong collaboration and advocacy for flexible funding. As we can relate to some of the cartoons, the one that talked about, this is not covered, the insurance, this is not covered by your illness, not covered by your policy. And I think COVID has taught us, the COVID situation has taught us that we shouldn't only focus funding for one particular problem, excuse me, for one particular problem at a time, that we'll always have compounding problems, things happening at the same time or after the other. So can we ensure that we do have that funding? So can we preposition and advocate to have that pot of funding? So in regards to the anticipation, and as I said, that impact-based forecasting is our future. You know, can we build strong collaborations to ensure that we do provide forecasts that meet the needs, the relevant needs, that forecasts are usable, forecasts are actionable, forecasts are understood? Can we try and ensure that we move towards that direction? And most importantly, I mean, for me, my take home at the end of the day is the umbrella of collaboration is what we need to ensure that anticipatory action is scaled up, we do it better, and we do it together. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this very powerful final statements, very concrete asks. We're noting them down. And now finally to you, Toby, what are your asks, but also one particular question we received from Camilo Fernandez. Do you know experiences of risk transfer that includes forecasts on social and economic factors? So maybe you start with that question first and then conclude with your ask to all partnerships. Thank you.
So firstly, the idea of providing economic help. So basically, you're looking at units of economic activity rather than asset-based loss is new. It's getting traction, but it's new, and a lot of even aid, and it's still the idea of replacing what is lost rather than giving you extra abilities to sort of drive your economic activity through challenges. So it's very new, and there isn't really any risk transfer based off forecasts. There was I think there was an El Nino program in Peru some time ago, but nothing really substantive. So this is sort of the forefront here, where you're turning insurance on its head. Rather than paying after an event to replace something, you're paying prior to an event to make sure that you've got resilience and you can actually push through things. That's the first one. When you're talking about these big, huge international groups, obviously they're very useful and they're very important because they bring different organizations together in different activities. Insure Resilience is a huge supporter of global parametrics, and we are a massive supporter of what they're trying to do, which is basically trying to sort of bring the private sector into risk transfer, but being supported by, in a way, donor funding. And I think this idea of flexible funding that can actually implement activities and pilots quickly without having to go through long processes, because once something's implemented and tested, the private sector is more likely to come in. What they're not likely to do is test these small things out in a small barangay in the Philippines. There's just no economic reason for them to do that. But if a group like Insure Resilience does it, then there is a lot of reason for them to follow. When you have groups like, looking at sort of on a bigger scale, weather data and forecasting, again, all this stuff is very expensive. To have these big organizations to provide that information to the ground and in a much more sort of collaborative way is great. So basically, it's keep doing what you're doing. More of these sort of conversations where the groups are sort of working together and talking together and sharing ideas. And then, as we were talking about before, more flexible funding, that when a great idea is noticed or seen, like what's happening in Bangladesh or what we've been up to, you can actually get access to capital to scale it quickly rather than having to go through often very onerous grant applications. So that's where I finish.
Thank you very much, Toby. So very good final words from all participants, and a big thank you to all for this interesting exchange. I think we've noted down engaging local governments, advocating for flexible funding, improving forecasts, and helping to pilot smaller things, and also their financing premiums, financing initial startup costs, so that the private sector can be engaged. So I think with that, we're coming to an end, not only of the panel session, but our overall event. I would now like to, well, first of all, thank all participants on behalf of the Insure Resilience Secretariat, but also I would like to make all of you aware of the 4th Insure Resilience Annual Forum that's coming up. It will take place virtually next week from the 7th to the 10th of December. There is still the opportunity to register many different side events, regional deep dives, and the main theme is protecting development in a changing risk environment. So we'd love to see many of you at this event as well. And thank you so much for your participation. And now back to you, Kara, for some final words.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you again for the last panel, our speakers. Really great to hear, and it's also encouraging. You know, we are echoing the same thing about protecting the most vulnerable, about acting early and having planning and financing in place. And I just want to reiterate what Irene said. This is our new slogan now: more, better, together. For anticipatory action, what we want to do is to cover more geographic area, reach more people, do more anticipatory action for more hazards beyond hydrometeorological. So the Anticipation Hub, as I mentioned in the beginning, is for that. It's to have a sustained exchange on these issues and collaborate between sectors because we want to do it together. And the same as Into Resilience, we also have the dialogue platform, the 8th dialogue platform on anticipatory humanitarian action happening next week. So we even have a let's say, cross event sessions, Into Resilience, cross collaboration with the Global Dialogue platform. The theme of this year is collaborating for climate, COVID, and conflict. So there's a registration information there. We have 42 sessions, and we're also very thankful that 50 partners have signed up for the Anticipation Hub. So we hope to get you there to discuss, to share your thoughts, your expertise, and also both Into Resilience and the Anticipation Hub are keen on the sustained exchange. So we both have working groups. So hopefully we'll hear from you on the different interests on engaging with the different thematic areas. So I guess from my side, that's it. Again, on behalf of IFRC and the Anticipation Hub, we thank you, the speakers, the participants, really engaging conversations we have today, and hope to see you at the 2 events. Thank you so much. And thank you, Daniel and Katarina and team.
Thank you, Kara. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Kara. Bye-bye.